we've all done it. You know, you see a problem, a task, and you think, I have good intentions. I'm smart. I can handle this.
Right.
And then a few hours later, you're just staring at the wreckage.
Hmm.
Maybe it's a leaky faucet you tried to fix yourself, and now your kitchen is basically a wading pool.
Or, maybe you saw a colleague struggling with some data analysis for a big presentation and you jump in to help.
Oh, no. I see where this is going.
And you only realize way too late that your attempts to, streamline the figures actually just confuse the entire data set, and their whole argument just collapses. The intention was pure. The result.
Destructive. Exactly. And that is what we are diving deep into today. We're calling it accidental incompetence.
Hmm.
It's this specific, messy, and just fundamentally human failing. It's not malice. You weren't trying to sabotage the presentation. It's not laziness. You were trying hard.
Yeah.
It's that collision point where good intentions run headlong into a wall of, well, ignorance, a deep misunderstanding, or maybe the most potent ingredient of all, misplaced confidence.
And it's really important to define that up front because, there are a lot of types of incompetence out there. But this one is the most optimistic.
How so?
Accidental incompetence is, ironically, often the most benign and the most easily curable. But first, you have to recognize it.
Okay, so think of the classic super volunteer at a charity event. They've got the most generous heart. They sign up for logistics, treasury, and public relations all at once because they just want to maximize their impact.
And by the end of the day, the invoices are lost, the banners are misspelled, and the celebrity guest was told the event started an hour late.
Total chaos.
Total chaos. And it all stemmed from a lack of understanding of their own bandwidth and the sheer complexity of the tasks they took on.
So the flaw isn't in their character. It's an honest but ultimately devastating overestimation of their own capability.
Exactly.
So let's unpack this. Let's get psychological because the roots of accidental incompetence are actually really well documented, and they're deeply human.
The foundational concept that describes this exact phenomenon is the Dunning-Kruger effect. It was identified by the psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger back in 1999.
Right, DKE.
And it's the essential psychological underpinning of this kind of accidental failure.
The Dunning-Kruger effect is so crucial to understanding why the world often seems, well, run by overly confident novices. It's a cognitive bias where people with low ability in a specific area just dramatically overestimate their competence.
Sometimes they believe they're experts.
Yeah. And the flip side, which people always forget, is that the people who are genuinely highly skilled, they tend to underestimate their own knowledge.
The original research was simple but so revealing. It was just college students predicting their scores on tests.
Okay.
And Dunning and Kruger found that the students who had the lowest level of mastery, the ones who scored in the bottom quartile, were the very same ones who believed they had performed exceptionally well.
So they didn't just fail the test.
No.
They didn't even know enough to know they were failing.
Precisely. They lacked the basic knowledge required to even recognize what a good or a poor performance looked like. As you gain more knowledge, you start to see the vast territory you haven't mastered.
And this is where we get that great visual of the Dunning-Kruger effect. I think they call it the peak of Mount Stupid.
That's the one. When a novice gets just a tiny bit of knowledge, their confidence is astronomical. They shoot straight to the summit, the peak of Mount Stupid, and they think, I know everything there is to know about this.
I'm ready to run the whole operation.
Absolutely. Then, as they genuinely try to learn more, they realize the scope of the field is immense, and they suddenly just plummet into what's called the Valley of Despair.
And that's the key moment, right? That painful realization that you know virtually nothing compared to what actually needs to be known.
And that painful realization is the cure for accidental incompetence. True experts, having climbed out of that valley, are painfully aware of the complexity. They see the nuance, they know where the landmines are, and that awareness breeds humility. It's why they so often express self-doubt, even with all their mastery. The DKE is all about that invisible gap between what you think you know and what you actually know.
Okay, let's see this in action. We have a great story of a man who, suddenly unemployed, decided he was going to be a truck driver.
Oh, this is a textbook biting off more than you could chew example.
Pure competence, zero competence.
So he gets the hat, he walks into a transportation company with just this supreme confidence, and he talks his way into getting the keys to a massive rig. The company maybe mistook his bluster for experience.
And the inevitable crash came pretty quickly.
Sooner than you'd think.
He drove the truck successfully onto the road, but the moment he had to do a complicated maneuver, backing up and turning around in a tight lot.
His confidence was just instantly destroyed by reality.
Hmm.
He got the huge rig so tangled up, so jackknifed, that he had to abandon it. He had to flag down another experienced trucker just to untangle the mess he'd made. That initial misplaced confidence led him straight into a situation he was totally unqualified for. And that leads us perfectly into the areas where this kind of thing is most noticeable and, frankly, most annoying.
Which would be.
Fields requiring skill, especially ones that don't have a clear, objective measurement system.
Ah, so this is where we run into the self-proclaimed talents of the world.
Precisely. If you're a high jumper, there's a bar. You either clear it or you don't. It's objective. But think about more subjective fields. The person who says they're a great singer or a gifted artist or an interior designer.
And their work is just cringeworthy.
Right, because there's no immediate objective feedback loop. No one tells the amateur chef that their 5-course meal is inedible, so they just stay right on top of Mount Stupid.
That idea, the failure to get objective feedback, is a perfect pivot into the business world. The stakes there are astronomical, and a failure to measure results in, well, bankruptcy.
Small business failure rates are devastatingly high, something like 90% in the first few years.
Wow.
And the source material points out that often this is rooted in accidental incompetence, specifically a failure to grasp the financial and operational mechanics.
It's the failure of what you might call competence transfer. You hear the argument all the time. I am a fantastic nail technician. My work is beautiful. How hard could it be to run a nail salon?
Or, I make the best tacos in the state, therefore I will run a successful restaurant.
Exactly.
The technical skill is absolutely there. They can do the nails, they can cook the food, but the accidental incompetence pops up because they assume that that one skill automatically transfers to competence in, HR law, payroll, inventory, marketing.
Legal compliance, systems integration, all of it. They overestimate their capability for the entire enterprise.
They don't know the difference between gross revenue and net profit, or they fail to budget for the slow season that always comes.
So the well-intentioned decision to start a business gets undermined by their total inability to even see the complexity of the systems required to survive.
The intention is admirable, Be your own boss, provide a great service. But lacking preparation and an inability to correctly assess the complexity, that is accidental incompetence on an economic scale.
Okay, now let's move past the kitchen floods and the small business failures. Let's look at what happens when this kind of ignorance, paired with institutional confidence, scales up to historical catastrophe.
We have 3 really stunning examples where small, avoidable mistakes just ballooned into these massive, sometimes deadly events.
These case studies really show how ignoring warnings or lacking qualified review can cost millions of dollars and, well, human lives.
And we start with one of the most bizarre urban disasters in American history.
The Great Molasses Flood of 1919 in Boston's North End.
Just try to imagine standing in Boston that day. There's this huge aging storage tank. It's 50 feet tall, 90 feet in diameter. It's owned by the Purity Distilling Company, and it holds over 2 million gallons of molasses.
2 million gallons. And what was the root cause of this incredible sticky disaster?
A systemic case of accidental incompetence. The tank was built in a hurry, with no qualified engineering review whatsoever.
And people knew it was a problem.
Oh, yeah. Witnesses reported the tank leaked constantly. People in the neighborhood would literally collect the dripping molasses for baking. This known defect was just ignored.
So there was no real inspection regime.
None.
Yeah.
And the final trigger was a sudden change in temperature. A warmer day after a cold snap, which caused the molasses, this dense, viscous liquid, to expand and build pressure in a tank that was already structurally unsound.
And when it failed?
The result was horrific.
Wow.
A wave of molasses, they estimated it was 25 to 40 feet high, surged through the streets at about 35 miles per hour.
35 miles per hour.
It killed 21 people and injured 150. Structures were just ripped from their foundations. The viscosity, the temperature, it was deadly.
And it led to one of the first major class action lawsuits in history, holding the company responsible for ignoring these clear, objective, visible signs of engineering failure.
It wasn't malice. It was managerial and engineering incompetence, compounded by just a willful ignorance of all the warnings.
But speaking of ignoring experts, we cannot discuss spectacular failure without recounting the legend of the exploding whale.
November 1970, Florence, Oregon. A massive 45-ton sperm whale washes ashore. It's a huge, rotting problem that needs solving.
I can only imagine the smell was a serious motivation for immediate action.
You'd think. So the authorities had a few options. They could bury it, tow it out to sea, or, disassemble it. But instead, they deferred to surplus explosives. They completely ignored the advice of marine biologists and engineers who were cautioning against this plan.
So what was the plan?
The plan, conceived at the peak of accidental incompetence, was to use a half-ton of dynamite to blast the whale into small, manageable pieces.
And the logic was that the pieces would just wash away with the tide.
Just wash away. That was the idea. The person in charge, demonstrating the height of Mount Stupid, was utterly confident in his intuitive solution. The result was broadcast live. It was the infamous ballistic redistribution.
Oh, no.
Instead of washing away, massive stinking chunks of blubber and tissue were hurled hundreds of feet inland. It flattened a spectator's car. A brand new Buick, I believe, injured onlookers.
You're kidding!
And in a detail that sounds like fiction, it reportedly killed at least one seabird midair, struck down by falling whale meat.
Wow. The lesson there is clear. When you're confronting a complex problem, deferring to intuition over expert knowledge just leads to chaos. But now, let's leave Earth entirely for our final high-stakes failure. The Mars Climate Orbiter launched in 1998.
This was a mission with a budget over $125 million. It was supposed to study Martian weather and relay data back to Earth. And it was lost. It just disintegrated after entering the Martian atmosphere at the wrong altitude.
And the fatal error. It was the systemic definition of accidental incompetence, a simple, catastrophic mismatch between imperial units and metric units.
To get specific, one engineering team, a contractor, calculated the thruster forces for the spacecraft in the older imperial standard, pound-seconds.
Okay.
The systems integration team at NASA, following standard protocol, just assumed they were receiving that data in the internationally recognized metric unit, which is Newton-seconds.
A classic case of assumptions substituting for verification. And a pound-second is about 4.45 Newton-seconds.
Right, so that small unit error resulted in a massive four-fold trajectory error over the 9-month journey to Mars.
What makes this so tragic is that the error was detectable, right, and preventable.
Absolutely. Navigation data showed trajectory anomalies well before the probe even got there, indicating it was off course. But those critical warnings were dismissed by the navigation team as just modeling noise.
So confidence overrode the actual data.
Right up until the point of inevitable failure.
That's $100 million incinerated because of a failure to communicate and verify a basic measurement system.
And that's what's so powerful about this deep dive. Whether it's a leaky faucet, a failed small business, or a lost satellite, the root cause is the same. It's a breakdown in preparation, attention, or verification, all driven by the assumption that good intentions are enough.
It is important to note, though, that the sources we reviewed categorize this type as the most curable. There are other categories like impairment or willful negligence, which are, far less benign.
Right. Accidental incompetence, since it's born from a lack of experience, can be fixed through learning. And that leads perfectly to a final anecdote that illustrates the immense, frustrating cost of managerial incompetence on a human level, the case study of the switch that wouldn't stay built.
This took place in a railroad yard in Omaha, Nebraska, during a punishing Midwestern summer. The task was essential and complex, rebuilding a major railroad switch. This requires precise placement of these oversized, heavy, creosote-soaked cross ties, according to really detailed engineering blueprints.
And the foreman in charge had a distinct lack of qualifications. He apparently got his position through nepotism. His perceived job in his own mind was just to yell at the crew to work harder, not to understand or apply the blueprints that dictated the precise placement of the track ties.
He was confident he knew the job simply because he was the boss.
He was incompetent, both as an employee, motivator, and crucially as an engineer, even though the blueprints were right there. And the result?
The extremely hardworking, exhausted crew rebuilt the same switch not once, not twice.
But 4 times.
4 times.
Each time, it failed inspection from the local engineering authority because the spacing was wrong. This led to massive friction, wasted physical labor, and logistical gridlock. It wasn't that the foreman was malicious. He was simply convinced his own gut instinct was superior to the professional, measured instructions on the engineering plan.
That failure really underscores the need for self-assessment. If you can't competently read a blueprint, screaming louder is not going to make the switch work.
Precisely. And this is the silver lining we have to emphasize. Accidental incompetence is often a lack of knowledge, which means it's correctable. You can move beyond these unintentional failures.
So what does this all mean for us? I mean, how do we move from that valley of despair to genuine competence?
The key is recognizing that good intentions have to be paired with preparation, with verification, and with honest self-assessment. The moment you realize you don't know the difference between pound seconds and Newton seconds, that's the moment you have to pause and ask the right questions.
And as the sources remind us, when that internal self-assessment fails, when people are too confident to check the manual, that's where our legal and regulatory systems step in.
Yeah.
It was once wisely pointed out that every single sentence on a warning label is essentially a little story about someone else's moment of accidental incompetence.
Regulations are the collective safety net we need when individual confidence outpaces capability.
Okay, let's recap this deep dive. We defined accidental incompetence. We explored its dangerous psychological root in the Dunning-Kruger effect, that confidence of the novice at the peak of Mount Stupid. And we saw how this plays out in subjective skills and small business failures.
Mhm.
Then we detailed three spectacular historical failures: the molasses flood, the exploding whale, and the Mars climate orbiter.
And the material we reviewed really invites you, the listener, to examine your own history with accidental incompetence. Those moments of miscalculation or overconfidence are the most crucial data points in your own development.
And this leads us to our final provocative thought for you to carry forward. The last time you encountered your own accidental incompetence, that kitchen flood, the failed spreadsheet, or the botched project, did you react to it as a necessary moment of genuine growth? Did it force you to learn the manual, take the class, or verify the data?
Or did you just brush it off as bad luck and move on too quickly, leaving your blind spot and the potential for a much larger disaster completely intact? Building competence requires confronting those failures honestly,